Hey, John Gilroy here. The musical The Wiz played on Broadway until just last year. Today, a new kind of whiz, a company that provides cloud-native security. Hit the music, Manny. Welcome to the Federal Tech Podcast, a podcast that connects you to federal technology leaders. My name is John Gilroy, and I will be your moderator. Our guest today is world-famous Bryan Rosensteel. He is the head of public sector marketing at the aforementioned company Wiz, W-I-Z. And I would be remiss if I didn't tell you we're recording this standing up live from the floor of the AFCEA'S TechNet Cyber in Baltimore, aren't we, Bryan?
Yeah, absolutely. So I probably hear the buzz and commotion that's going on. Always love coming up here to the AFCEA'S TechNet show in Baltimore. It's almost like a homecoming at this point.
Yeah. Had a bit of a surprise at 1 o'clock today when we had a fire alarm and 6,000 people had to stand outside, huh?
Yeah, surprisingly, that is not the first year it's happened. But fortunately, hey, it was just, false alarm, everything's fine. But yeah, that was a surprise.
Yeah. So the focus here obviously is on security. And today I want to maybe dive into this company called Wiz. Only been around since 2020, kind of blowing up. Everyone's talking about you guys. And I guess you focus on what they call CNAP, and I think the abbreviation stands for Cloud Native Application Protection Platform. So give me a 30-second overview on that, and then we'll dive in.
Yeah, no, that's right. And that's a term that Gartner came out with. And so from Gartner's definition of what a CNAP is, they're really talking about 4 different areas. It would be CSPM, KSPM, it would be CEM or CIEM, and then CWP. Not to really go into each of the different areas, but it's really 4 kind of previously distinct tools that people were using for understanding, okay, what's my security like posture for overall for my cloud, what's going on within my containers, what's going on within the identities section, and we're really talking like our NPEs, our service accounts, our cloud identity accounts for connecting across, and also within our workloads. Well, Gartner recognized with all of these individual point solutions was not scaling well and was leading to a lot of visibility gaps. So the idea of a CNAP, Cloud Native Application Protection Platform, is to come in and natively bring all of those point solutions together under a single pane of glass that then you can understand truly what is going on within my cloud environment, what do I have deployed, and more importantly, the context of how everything connects together. And so from a government standpoint, and what really excited me to kind of come to Wiz and really kind of changed, because I used to be identity for, like a decade and a half. But when I looked at Wiz and I saw the overview, I was like, this is an actionalized RMF, like a NIST risk management framework, where we can truly look at what risk is. So one of the things I tell people a lot is risk is, if you actually look up the true definition of risk from NIST, nowhere in there will they say, give me your vulnerabilities, your misconfigurations, your shared secrets, etc. It's all around, show me what has the potential for greatest harm for the organization. And that's what risk is. And your risk assessment looks at indicators of risk to make that determination. That's when we look at, vulnerabilities, misconfigurations, all those things that people traditionally say, well, that's our risk. And so what a CNAP allows you to do is actually understand, here is how things connect from a networking perspective, from an identity perspective, from a data perspective, from a device perspective, and an application workload perspective. Here's all our different indicators of risk, and now we can prioritize based upon these toxic combinations where we think there is the greatest potential for harm for an attacker to come in and move laterally across the organization. So, in a nutshell, from a federal perspective, that's what I would say CNAP is able to do, and do in a way from an automated fashion that we never could do before. Yeah. I think back to my government days, and in order to tease out this kind of information, it usually involved paper printouts, and we were trying to piece together, this enclave connects to that enclave. And when we moved to the cloud, that ability that we used to somewhat be able to handle fairly well on-prem just went out the window. People are developing so quickly, half the time people don't even know what is deployed. So getting a handle on that, I think, is critical.
I'm going to do some name dropping here. I think 15, maybe 18 years ago, I sat down with Vivek Kundra, and he said, cloud first. I don't think old Vivek ever dreamt of the hybrid cloud, the multi-cloud, the private cloud, this cloud, that cloud. And my other hero, David Linthicum, he says, well, now we start talking about alt clouds. And so I got to turn to Bryan and go, well, It's a lot of clouds to manage, isn't it?
Yeah,
I mean, what could a cloud-native application protection platform provide, given this splitting world? It's like atoms are splitting, isn't it?
That's funny. Yeah, 18 years ago, I was in a place that I won't name publicly, and I was on. Was
it a federal prison?
Yeah, pretty much. Is what it's all like. Yeah, I didn't know what the weather was doing until I went out of the building. And but it was a whiteboard. I'll never forget it. And it was this assistant director, and it just said cloud ? Like, we went from that to everything has to be cloud first, right? Let's adopt it and move as quickly as we can. So, and it went from everyone thought it was just going to be a cloud, which they didn't understand even what it was. And now it's, in order for resiliency, let's have multi-cloud. Well, then that becomes a huge problem because I only have visibility into each individual cloud. So I already struggled to understand what was going on there. Now I've just compounded the problem because now I have visibility issues across, whether it's AWS or GCP or Azure. So a good CNAPP is designed to connect each of these, not from like an agent standpoint, but in order to truly tackle the visibility problem, you need to go agentless. And that's not to pick on agents. I think they have their place. But if your ability to solve visibility requires you to have the visibility to know where to put the agents, you're in a catch-22. And that's where we've been for years. So instead, by coming in through a cloud-native API, which is what a good CNAPP does, you end up starting top-down, and you would be amazed at the level of detail of information you can actually pull out at that API layer. So really understanding, okay, this is what's going on with the networking, here's the actual port protocol, so you can even drill even deeper than that we don't have time to go into. You can do the same from device standpoint. You can understand, okay, this is actually what's installed on that device. If you want to be able to pull out what's actually going on within runtime, that's when you need a lightweight sensor. But to be able to actually pull out an SBOM on demand, the software bill of materials to actually know what's deployed, you don't need an agent to do that. But by going down that top-down approach, we're really able to unlock that visibility and context that previously led to a lot of unfortunate, inadvertent, like shadow IT. People think of shadow IT as like this nefarious thing, person in the basement, like trying to do something wrong. It's just, we moved so quickly, things didn't get documented properly, or people didn't realize the proper procedure for documentation, and things got missed.
Yeah.
And that's been the persistent issue in cloud, especially multi-cloud. So a good CNAPP connects from that native API across each of the different cloud environments and pulls it into that kind of single pane of glass to now we can see that kind of cross what's going on, what's my biggest issue regardless of cloud environment, what's my biggest issue within this individual cloud environment. And honestly, what we've seen too, and this is, again, an unfortunate side effect of how quickly we're trying to move, is we're seeing inadvertent cross-cloud risk exposure. So as a developer, I'm working in my AD environment. I'm trying to develop as quickly as possible because that's my metric that I'm measured by, is how quickly am I able to execute my code and move on to the next project. Sometimes security gets baked in there, sometimes it doesn't. Government does a pretty good job with that, but we'd always do better. When they're doing that and they're taking that approach, sometimes they may inadvertently have a secret that they expose for, let's say, AWS. But this is being deployed in Azure, or this is being deployed in GCP. Well, the native cloud tooling within those environments won't necessarily identify, hey, you inadvertently, made this misconfiguration or this exposure in this other cloud environment. How would it, right? That wouldn't be a proper expectation. Well, with a CNAPP, we can actually see, oh, look, even though that this container is deployed in AWS, I see the exposed secret for GCP. You can jump cross-cloud.
I was just having coffee with a guy from Pakistan, and he must speak 2 or 3 languages. It's like speaking 2 or 3 languages, yes. Isn't it? Yes, we speak GSP. Yes, we speak Azure. So you can translate and do a proper risk analysis.
That's exactly right.
When you were speaking, I was taking down notes. Cross-cloud risk exposure. I was thinking about the complexity of that. We're at a security conference, but you got to quote another one of my heroes, Greg Tuhill. Greg Tuhill said, complexity is the bane of security. Yes. This is what you're describing, a complex environment.
Exactly.
More security exposure, isn't it?
Yes, 100%. And as much as we could distill that down into a way, so this is something that Wiz is really passionate about as well. So you'll hear us talk a lot about visibility and context, and you'll hear us a lot talk about democratizing security. And really what they're talking about from the democratizing security standpoint is making sure that security becomes something that gets embedded across your organization and not in a negative way. A lot of people think like, I heard someone here at the show floor earlier say, oh yeah, security and compliance, that's the office of no. That's not what it should be. It should actually be empowering for the organization in a very positive light. So when you think about the democratization of security, if I can speak, what we're really referring to there is this notion of, making it so that you can digest the impact of this particular type of misconfiguration or vulnerability, the actual indicators of risk that goes into, hey, we need you to fix this because look at what the impact is, and you don't have to have a cybersecurity background to understand it, right? Because developers, everyone has their own specialty, right? Developers know code very, very well. They can understand how to fix that. They may not necessarily understand the policy side as much. People can only handle whatever it is that their area of expertise is within. But when you can show them, yeah, we need you to fix it in the code, here's why we need you to make it a priority. Because this actually has this misconfiguration or this vulnerability that then leads over laterally over to this, S3 bucket or something else. Yeah, and now you're inadvertently exposing the sensitive data. We know you didn't necessarily intend to do that. In fact, you never wanted to have your system configured to connect to it. But by the very nature of the complex systems, you're talking about complexity, the fact that applications, or I guess I'm dating myself there, I guess just apps. They're more horizontally spread when you think of the software development lifecycle. It's no longer everything's all encompassed and I just have an executable that I run and now it's all just within a directory within like a program file. Now, code itself is just like a blueprint. Yeah. And that is something that when I actually try to understand what that workload means, I have to look across both code and my repository and what I've got deployed within my cloud or multi-cloud environment to really understand overall how this thing is operating. Giving people that clear view and distilling the information down of this is why it's that priority, we've seen great adoption across a number of different organizations, not just in federal, but actually in over in the commercial sector as well.
Yeah, I know.
And they talk to how empowering that is for embedding the culture of security across the organization in a positive way. We had, I think one of our favorite to talk about is there was a particular, it was like a candy bar company. And it's weird to talk about candy bars.
You got to be careful about. Don't say any words.
Right? But they were very risk adverse for going into a cloud environment because they didn't understand cloud, and they're like, but they were aware enough to know we can't just adopt it because we don't understand it. So we partnered with them from a Wiz perspective, and then they were really then able to understand, okay, if I bring in this, move this component over to the cloud, this is how it connects, this is how I can manage that risk, and it allowed them to actually move at a faster timeline than what they previously thought they could do. We're seeing the same things with AI. I want to bring in AI, but I am risk adverse because I don't want to inadvertently expose the wrong data. I know I'm setting up on these training data, but how do I make sure that I'm not accidentally connected to something else in the environment?
Yeah.
So with that, kind of CNAPP capability, you can see, yep, I see what's going on. Here's all the admin credentials that connect over. Here's the entitlements that they have to connect over. Yeah, that there is a pathway over to PII data. You need to change those entitlements. Mm-hmm. Here's a suggestion to do that so that you can adopt AI more securely.
So one of the people I follow on LinkedIn is a guy named Bryan Rosensteel, and you had a status update last week, and it was about a blog article,
yes.
Data Security Posture Management Program for FedRAMP. And I said, well, this seems pretty nerdy. And I read it, and I said, no, it's actually pretty well done. It's very easy to read, and really and you can say, well, the nerds would say, DSPM for FedRAMP. Well, no, really, it's data security. It's posture management for this crazy cloud world we live in. So I think that what I'm going to put in the show notes is a link to this little blog post. It's pretty well done. Did you write? You contributed to it, right?
Yes, yeah. It was one of the. Yeah. I mean, everything's always a team effort at Wiz, but yeah, I was one of the lead authors on it. So data security, posture management, or DSPM. It was really excited to get that into our FedRAMP environment.
Really, it's important.
Yeah. So. In a nutshell, it'll out of the box help you to identify certain types of sensitive information, like where's her PII or PHI or PCI, all of those controlled pieces of information. But you can also do custom data classification rules. And so when we think about what that means for our broader kind of federal community, right? Let's bring in our DIB, the Defense Industrial Base. They need to understand, okay, where do I have got controlled unclassified information or CUI or CUI, depending on how you want to handle that acronym. Being able to very quickly understand where that is, but then more importantly, the context of what connects to it, allows you to define your boundary for things like a CMMC audit. And defensibility, and I don't mean defensibility as in like I've got strong firewalls or these types of protocols in place, but defensibility in that, look, I am following the proper process, and here's how I can defend that, because here's the information showing you what I do connect to and what I don't connect to. That's what got me really excited around it. Understanding where sensitive data resides and what connects to that data, if you can challenge and tackle that problem, you're well on your way to trying to reduce your overall attack surface, posture.
We're at a tech conference. We had a fire alarm. We had 6,000 people outside, all kinds of companies here. And if you want to learn more about Wiz, because it's only been around a few years, but it's really popular, what I'm going to do is put in the show notes a link to the verticals market of the government for Wiz.
Yes.
So it's wiz.io/vertical/government. I know it's hard to write down, but it'll be a link there in the show notes right under federaltechpodcast.com. Before we began this interview, we were talking about the DIB and Defense Industrial Base, and I listened to a presentation this morning from someone from the DoD, and they talked about they're offering services where they would look into the Defense Industrial Base and find vulnerabilities, identify them, and then try to repair them or mitigate the vulnerabilities. And so I'm saying to myself, these are probably going to be cloud vulnerabilities. This is probably what this is. They found in the last 6 months in the DIB 723 vulnerabilities, and they fixed 103 of them. And I'm going, well, what about the 600 ones? Is that Brian's job? But this is a lot of the vulnerabilities are in the cloud because they just don't know the unintended consequences of linking one to another, and it pops up in different foreign languages. You don't know what that word means.
Yeah, it's like I said, we're built around. So I have a different talk that I do when I talk about zero trust and how CNAPP fits into it. It actually fits really well into kind of the foundational steps of zero trust. Think about visibility, automation, governance, things of that nature. But I always start that talk off where I show the ENIAC, which is the kind of first Turing complete computer, back from the 30s and 40s. And I show that because I said this is where security, from an IT perspective, got rooted, where you had a physical brick building and you understood everyone who was walking in and out. You could literally walk down, you were inside the computer, you could count all of the tubes, all of the wires, etc.
I remember those days.
Right, and that was your accountability. And so we started from that world of on-prem, and we built everything around being able to do physical inventory of every physical machine and then understanding logically what was on those machines. We still have a lot of our compliance and security metrics built around that kind of understanding. That's not how the cloud operates. No. You don't even know what data center you're in or data centers. You barely understand what region you're in. No. Things have moved
it's conceptual
that quickly.
Change.
Yes. And so that's the cultural aspect of this. Has been so much of a challenge. And, being able to properly wrap your head around, look, this can't just be another, give me a printout of every vulnerability in the environment and how you're going to remediate within a certain number of days. By the way, yes, you can do that. You can automate that process out. But and there will be stopgaps like, yep, but that's what I measured on today. But the idea, hopefully, is, okay, understand what processes that you have to do today to meet your compliance needs, automate as much as possible, and then when we talk about modernize the culture to understand this is what security needs to be in the cloud environment, and really meet the cloud with the cloud, which is, I don't know, maybe a fun buzzword or something like that, but understand we cannot continue to try to repurpose these on-prem tools that came from literally when I could inventory the wires and vacuum tubes.
No.
To understanding this is fundamentally different, so our approach must scale with it.
I speak to a lot of software developers, and as you know, they talk about continuous improvement because the iteration, continuous, and we know it's continuous. I understand that. And a lot of people don't realize that if you switch to a cloud service provider, there's also continuous monitoring that has to take place because days are changing, everything's a changing every day, isn't it? I mean, look at our fire alarm. Things are changing all the time. Yeah. But it's one thing to say, well, Brian, you should really do continuous monitoring on your 3 cloud instances, but then doing it. I mean, so this is the whole discussion about agent versus agentless, and an agentless environment allows you to actually not just talk about, but actually, do the continuous. It's not easy. No.
I mean, we've got a team of people who need to do it actually for our monthly ConMons, for our FedRAMP accreditation that we have. Now, we've automated a huge part of that. And that's been the key. And I'm not going to name the government organization because I don't want to point fingers at anyone, but I had this conversation. How do you address this in your environment? And they told me, we don't have enough people, we don't have enough resources. We rely on the external audit to help us to understand where we're weak.
You're an ex-Govy, so to be honest with you. I mean, it's true.
Yeah.
And they don't.
And so, and it's been that it's insurmountable. I have, I'll switch gears and not poke at the government. Commercial organizations, so we know we have more than 1 million vulnerabilities. We don't know how to tackle it. And so, we are almost paralyzed by what seems insurmountable. So by being able to come in and say, okay, well, let's reframe to where you should be monitoring the environment. It kind of goes to your continuous monitoring aspect. Monitor the environment. If I only have 5 minutes out of my day for remediation, because we're all wearing multiple hats and all doing so much and taking so much on, how do you have the greatest impact on the overall reduction of your attack risk? And that's why we've got to do that prioritization. Okay, this is the most critical toxic combination. Here's some remediation guidance for you to go out and execute that to reduce that potential issue. The hope is if you start at the most critical, over time, you're making the largest impact. You join what we hope the Zero Critical Club. Half of all Wiz customers have actually joined that, which means the most toxic combinations of risk they've eliminated out of their environment. We celebrate that. Welcome to the club, and we praise every single one. Over time, now I know the most critical is gone. Hopefully then I get rid of the highs, and eventually, maybe one day you get it to where you have no vulnerability. But let's be honest with ourselves. New vulnerabilities are coming up every single day as a part of that process. You're monitoring constantly. You're getting refresh data at least every 24 hours. Sometimes it actually is refreshed upon an event. New S3 bucket goes up, so let's do a new scan type deal. That allows you to get ahead of things more quickly versus I wait for a triennial audit or a yearly audit or whatever that duration may be. Then all of a sudden I have this huge dump of information that comes in. I have to freeze everything to where I can't do any updates until and that's what's been paralyzing for us. There's a lot in the news going on with ATOs, and I can remember when I was in government, we had an ATO that went 18 months. Huh. I won't name what it was for, but it was an important system. 18 months where we were not allowed to innovate. We could only do critical patching, and that was it. That we cannot operate that way. Not at the speed that is demanded by the way that the world's moving today. So that's why we're hearing a lot about how do we automate, how do we move past this, how do we utilize technology to dig us out of this hole that we put ourselves in by wanting to make sure things are secure before we put it in, which is a good. I'm not saying compliance is bad, no. and I won't, but compliance should never hinder what we need to do to meet the mission need. And I think that we've gotten out of balance with that, and it's time to rebalance.
That's the headline for this interview. Bryan Rosensteel says compliance is bad, then you'll be working at the McDonald's next week.
Yeah, you're going to be kicked out of here. We're going to hear another alarm go off.
Yeah, another fire alarm. Cart this guy out of here, the guy in the black suits. Well, we didn't even talk about CMC or ATO. I have this long list of topics we haven't gotten into, but it's gone by so fast. Maybe we'll come back again, I don't know when, and just take one niche of this information. It's like, what about, managing threats? Well, we didn't even talk about managing threats, and why the heck is this Wiz? It came out of nowhere. It was like a storm. It just is like in the original Wizard of Oz, it was a tornado came out of somewhere and changed everything, didn't it?
Yeah, we've been externally someone called us a unicorn on a rocket ship.
Yeah, that's what it is.
So we embrace that, and we've got lovely. You'll have to grab a pair of socks. Yeah. We've got these lovely socks. A unicorn on the rocket ship, riding Wiz.
Oh, good.
So yeah, very excited. But yeah, I'd love to come back and pick one of these topics and really drill into. Hey, look, this is how.
So many. Yeah.
It's not just like a good to do, but here's how you actually operationalize, and here's how you achieve it.
Good. Well, unfortunately, we're running out of time here. You have been listening to the Federal Tech Podcast with John Gilroy. I'd like to thank my guest, Bryan Rosensteel, Head of Public Sector Marketing at Wiz.
Thank you, John. Always a pleasure.